光のオーロラ身にまとい、君は戦う人になれ。傷つくことを恐れたら、地球は悪の手に沈む。 Wake up the hero、 燃え上がれ。光と闇の果てしないバトル。 Wake up the hero、 太陽よ、愛に勇気を与えてくれ。仮面ライダー黒いボディ、仮面ライダー真っ赤な目、仮面ライダーブラックアイス。優しさよりも激しさが大事な時があるものさ。君よ怒りを稲妻に変えて、宇宙に解き放て。 Wake up the hero、 胸の奥、君の知らない君がいるのさ。 Wake up the hero、 目を覚ませ。誰がピンチを救うのか。仮面ライダーきらめく稲妻、仮面ライダー愛の戦士、仮面ライダーブラックアイス。 Wake up the hero、 燃え上がれ。光と闇の果てしないバトル。 Wake up the hero、 太陽よ、愛に勇気を与えてくれ。仮面ライダー黒いボディ、仮面ライダー真っ赤な目、仮面ライダーブラックアイス。
What's happening, everybody? How's it going? Here to hang out with you a little bit and give you, hopefully, a little bit of entertainment and some information on a stream I should have given you quite a while ago. I was looking, I think YouTube said it had been a couple of weeks since the last art stream. So, yeah, definitely should have done that for you before now. But shit got busy for the holidays. I think everybody pretty much understands that. JDX the Kid, what's up? B Fletch, welcome. First things first. Oh no, that's not the one I wanted. Well, that's silly. Where are we at here? Didn't I just rearrange all this shit? At all these fucking scenes. This should be up here. Here we go. Here's a nice little scene to show everybody what we're working on today. So if you were with us for the last art stream, we did sketching, we did line work, and then I just kind of filled in a gray background for this guy to show how we are going to, I guess to get to the process of coloring it is a more appropriate way to put that. So we found our image through sketching. We did some really crisp line work. We talked about line weights and how to kind of show how to make an image pop and how to show light and dark and where it all hits the image based on the line weight, and a number of other little sort of minutia tricks with line weight as well. And we're going to go a little bit deeper this time. I'm going to do one coloring method. Who knows? Depending on how long I sit on here tonight, we might do a couple of coloring methods, or maybe I'll save another one for next time. But there's a couple of different approaches, and I thought it'd be fun to go through those couple of different approaches. Yeah, a whole handle left over. For a second, I thought you said you had a whole hangover, but maybe you have that too. I actually didn't go too nuts over the holidays. I went nuts eating, not nuts drinking. But I am off for the next week, so there's still time for that. I actually came equipped tonight with my stimulants and my depressants, so that I could get stimulated enough to get depressed later. No, I had a little pre-workout beforehand. Hopefully I can get up a little bit. I felt like the last time I was kind of listening to a little bit. The last one of these we did, and I was like, God damn, I was so just low energy and dead and blah. And maybe it's just a byproduct of focusing on the drawing. I'm not sure, but we'll see. I do actually really quickly, before we get too deep into this, I wanted, in case anybody hadn't seen it, to show just the single greatest image that I've seen in Twitter on Twitter in a long time. I just realized I don't actually have a source set up for this yet, so bear with me. Oh, do I need to do a separate window for that? Boo. Give me a second here. Professional streaming and all that stuff. Feel free to laugh at me. Yeah, browser. What the fuck? Why aren't you, here we go. I swear to God, every time I kick on OBS, I forget how to do anything. No. Get that out of there. Alright. I'm having a boomer moment. Fuck it. Maybe I'll just share the, see if I can share this nonsense in the chat. Good Lord. There you go. Go check out that shit from Dank Francis. I'm sure everybody's seen it because it's getting a whole bunch of traction, but it's the goddamn greatest thing I've ever seen. As I said on Twitter, this is like art to an artist. This real, or at least maybe just to me, this really fucking weird, wild, over the top, stretchy faced, disgusting looking nonsense. I fucking love it. And that's the kind of stuff that gets me going. Maybe it's just because the art that I like the best is the stuff that I look at and say to myself, like, I don't even know how a person got in the mindset to do something like that. Because obviously I'm very fixated on very sort of clean, cartoony stuff. But anyway, last thing I'm going to swap over some music here because I do believe this little playlist here is just about to end on us. Tried to make a little something just for starting out streams before I kick it over to something a little more permanent. And then we will go hard. Oh, you know what? I had some fun music tonight. Yeah. Some Power Glove. If you're unaware, Power Glove is good shit. All right. What were we doing? We're doing art. So the only thing that's really different from the image that you would have seen if you were here last time or watched the last stream, the only thing that's really different is I have thrown a reference image in here of the existing the existing Darksea avatar, whatever you want to call it. Because again, maybe this is just a byproduct of what I do for a living, but I'm very into fidelity. I want to make sure that my skin tones and everything, the colors of everything match each time that I do it, just so, you know, it feels very familiar. We're not going out of our way to change Darksea too much. I don't even know if that's... I call him Darksea all the time, because that's kind of what he is to me. Maybe I shouldn't associate myself so directly with this thing. But anyway, the process we're going to work with tonight. I guess the two main ways that I would approach coloring an image would be either blocking the color in first, which is pretty much coloring it like a coloring book, like you would with a coloring book. You see the lines, you draw the colors inside the lines that you want. Or there is a method where you shade everything first, so you kind of visually sculpt the image with light and dark just over a gray, medium gray color like this. And while you can get to the same final image, it's just kind of a different mindset and it's a different way of approaching things that I think can lead you into two different directions and make things feel a little bit different. So I actually think I'm going to start off with that second method that I talked about. We're going to go lights and darks over this gray image to really get a sense of the depth of this thing before we ever even put any color on it. And the way I like to do that is I'll make a new layer that's over the top. As you can see, if I click that on and off, over the top of this existing layer. But I like to reduce, I go with a flat black, which is not what we'll keep for our shadows, it's just for this exercise. And then I will reduce it to the opacity down to about 25% so that it shows through. So that we're basically adding a 25% transparent black over everything. And I'm going to stay pretty basic bitch with it. We're going to pretend that our sun is up here. So this is our light source, or I should say sun, whatever. There's going to be other light sources. I'm eventually going to show you coloring with two additional light sources coming from the left and the right. But our primary one is this one right here. And we're just going to look and say, you know, just think about it and say where, if the light was hitting this stuff, hitting this form from that direction, what would be the darkest? And we're just going to start there. And we're going to go, again, coloring book style. I'm not going to worry about drop shadows or anything like that. We are just going to darken in sort of the sides of things that are on the opposite side of the light, i.e. where the shadow would be. My voice is sexy? Well, thank you. Thanks. I've actually heard quite a bit over the years that I've got the perfect face and voice for radio. Smooth and buttery and all that stuff. I think I sound nasally and disgusting, but nobody likes their own voice. And what's more, is I'm sure everybody's heard me mention at least once or twice, I've done podcasting in the past, and I'm kind of ass at it. I think I'm kind of ass at this. To be frank, I think I'm a little better when I have someone to bounce off of, when I've got a second person to kind of chill with me and talk. And believe me, my mind has sort of been churning in that direction, like how to make my streams outside of this art stuff a little more interesting and palatable for you guys. I haven't come to a conclusion on what it is I need to do yet, but I think I've got the voice. I think I've got enough of a personality to be entertaining. What I struggle with, at least in my opinion, is keeping the ball rolling in an entertaining way when I don't have anyone to kind of bounce nonsense off of. I still don't know how to say it, so I'm going to say SSTVDDD. My guy. Seeing you everywhere today. Seeing you everywhere these days in general. How are you doing? Thanks for coming to hang out. I'm also debating, we're going to see how tired I get later on, because I am an old man. But since I don't have to work in the morning, and the missus has actually been letting me do the gym a little bit later in the morning so that I don't actually have to be up at 3 a.m. to go, who knows? May hang out a little long tonight, but we'll see. No promises. I just said I wasn't going to do drop shadows. We're not going to do drop shadows. And there's a reason for that. But you'll see it as we go. I personally like to keep my drop shadows and my sort of natural form shadows on 2 separate layers. And if it's not clear what I mean when I say that, is essentially the shadow that would be cast from like this hat, right? That is different than just a shadow that's naturally going to be on the opposite side of our light source. I want to lay all those in first. I really feel strongly about keeping them separate, and I struggle to keep them separate all the time. I end up drawing all of them at once, and I end up trying to go back and change, so I'm going to try not to do that. Yeah, very much so. With the opacity of 25%, acrylic or a watercolor, I would liken it more to a watercolor, because look, when I take this thing... Ooh, you guys get to see a little Common Rider. Oh no, it doesn't show my background. Like when I dial this back up, see, it's going to go straight to a flat black. And again, there's a reason for me doing this. You're going to see this as we move further on, because we're going to change this color. We are going to change sort of the filtering method of this layer to really spruce up our colors. So while we're using this as black because we're working with a flat gray image, this is not going to stay black through the end of the drawing. Because I'm also a firm believer in using flat blacks and whites for your colors, your highlights, and your shadows. And I think just about any digital artist will tell you this, is a pretty quick and easy way to a dull, flat image. You gotta put at least a little hint of a color, some sort of saturation of a color into your shadows. But we'll get there. That's the beauty of digital drawing. So when I used to do a lot of traditional art, I worked a lot with markers, and what I would do is just layer with really light markers. Start light, go to dark. You always start light, go to dark, and just layer and layer colors on top of colors, and you get really interesting color combinations. So I would say, that what we're going to use our layers for digitally here is very similar to that in spirit, while not necessarily similar in, I guess, sort of the final product. Or actually, I even should say the final product. And the execution would be a better way to put that. Not similar in the execution. I'm also not putting any shadow here yet, because I also try to ask myself, where would we have harder shadows and where would we have sort of a softer, more gradient shadow? And I'm using a hard brush to lay this stuff in now. So that's another way I kind of like to approach it. I like to attack it with like, here's some hard shadows, here's some soft shadows, and then here's drop shadows. And I sort of let all 3 of those be their own thing for reasons that I believe will become clear later on. And see, sometimes I even catch myself going in there and like doing the shadows on these folds, and then saying to myself, well, actually, the whole part of this arm would be in shadow. So I kind of took the time to do that for no reason, because I really just need to lay a nice thick shadow over that whole area. But what this is really gonna do for us in the long run is, theoretically, hopefully, it's gonna leave us with a much more dynamic image. When you consider, almost like when you consider multiple light sources, you've got the sun, you've got light bouncing off of other surfaces, light in a room. When you consider all these different light sources, you also have to consider all the different ways that light hits the body and all the different types of shadows that creates. So I'd say there's sort of multiple different ways to look at both light and shadow, and when you can become comfortable enough to sort of mix and blend all those different ways of working, ways of looking at it into a single image, that's when an image becomes really dynamic from a color perspective. And personally, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for some nice dynamic color. Do clothing and skin have different textures for the shadowing? So it depends on what you're trying to convey, actually. So the vest that I draw here, this vest is, for me, it's always the silver vest, and it's got a high shine to it. So when we get to that point, well, I'll talk to you about that. I'll talk you through how I approach that, because how I would sort of texture and gradate his porous, gross skin is going to be drastically different from how I'm going to texture and gradate that fucking awful aluminum foil vest that he always wears. That's actually kind of why, as stupid as it sounds, when I was sitting here rendering one of these one day, and multiple people had asked for these streams anyway, but when I was sitting here rendering one of these one day, I was like, this dumb character is actually kind of perfect to explore and explain a lot of different digital art principles, or at least what I see as digital art principles, because it has a little bit of everything in it. It just kind of worked out that way. We got some shiny, we got some rough. We're gonna have lights and darks, and I actually, once we get this all colored, I'll do a little bit of lighting stuff, but I would eventually like to come in here and just do an entire session where we talk about different sort of different ways to execute light, from like, putting them in a really dark space, putting them in a really bright space, messing with different light sources, light coming from different directions. Like I said, I'm doing like super basic bitch lighting here. The fucking sun in your top left is the most basic bitch lighting you can do in a drawing. I'm not on a Cintiq Artist of Death. I am on an XP pen, one of their competitors, but I sing their praises all the time. I actually think that XP Pen, which is the company name, and Huion, Huion, I think they've come a long way to sort of stomping Cintiq in a lot of ways. Big one being they match, if not exceed, the quality in a lot of ways, but the cost is much more preferable. Cintiq has the name recognition and the history to ask the money that they ask. But I also think that they kind of rely on sort of owners of companies and stuff who buy those things en masse, and Cintiq is the brand name that they know, so that's what they go out and buy. When really, if my boss asked me, I would direct him towards outfitting his entire business with XP pens and saving himself a ton of money. But let's just say nobody at work is asking my opinion on business, nor should they. I don't have the education that, say, a Dark Side Phil has. Our boy. Actually put a little bit in there, because I am going to gradate that later. But there would be a little bit of hard light in there. Seeing as you go through this, you'll come back and you'll start thinking, oh, maybe I should add something here, I should add something here. It's not... You'll make your way around the image slowly doing stuff, but it's not... You can change everything. That, I guess, is what I'm getting at. That's the beauty of digital art. You can change, you can update as much as you want, as long as you don't commit, as long as you don't collapse one layer on top of another, which I think you have to eventually do. You eventually just kind of have to nut up and say, this is good enough, and accept it. But this early on, keep your layers. I use physical mediums and I've been struggling with multiple light sources for ages. It's hard with physical mediums. At least I think it is, especially somebody coming from the background I did, where I was working pretty much exclusively in marker, because when you're working in ink, you can't go back. Like the same thing I was kind of preaching about having layers and the benefits of that. You don't have that in physical medium. Or at least not in markers. Now, if you're working in oils, acrylics, like a lot of different mediums of paint, you do have that luxury of going back and just painting brighter stuff over it. And there are ways to get around it with inks. Don't get me wrong. There are methods to painting over the top of it, but it really is an art form to be able, in and of itself, to be able to look at an image and attack it without darkening things out too much to a point where you can't pull it back, or at least you can't pull it back without some absolutely massive overhaul. There's a million different types of physical mediums, and they all act differently. I think the most eye-opening thing I ever worked with when I was in art school the first time, I ended up taking an encaustics painting class For those of you who don't know, no, encaustic is painting with wax, essentially. And it's fun. It's difficult. It's sort of easy to do, hard to master. And that was very eye-opening for me to just, I didn't even know that there was a traditional medium out there like that, let alone one that acted the way encaustics do when you manipulate them. It's an interesting one for sure. All right, so I would say I've laid in my basic hard shadows here. Okay, so now I'm going to make another layer on top of that one, which still bugs me. So in this program, you can't really dock your tools. You can't dock your layers. Like, I'm moving my layer palette around right now, but you're just seeing my icon. Man, I'll have to look and see if there's a way to actually capture that eventually, because I can tell you guys what I'm using, but it would be nice to be able to physically show it to you. But anyway, I've made another layer on top of this layer, and again, I'm going to knock it down to about 25%. So I'm essentially using, the exact same paint, for lack of a better term, but now I'm going to go in and do drop shadows, and that's going to be, again, like looking at this and saying, oh, the hat, it'll kick a little bit of a shadow over here, or this nub that comes off the hat will kick a shadow over here. And you see how when I lay one over the other, now we're getting a nice layering effect. And along with my drop shadows, I will go in and sort of hit the darkest parts again, because that's just going to continue. Like anything that's on, I guess I would consider on the exact opposite side of our main light source, I'm going to give it one more once over, because it's going to darken it up a little bit, and it's going to start to push our darks darker and our lights lighter, and that's what we want. That's how we're going to, again, it's kind of like we're sculpting with light. We're sculpting in 2 dimensions. He's got that big brow that hangs over, so I'm going to go again over under the eyebrow there. Oh, excuse me, I had to mute for a second. Had a little something going on in my throat there, and I do a bad enough job of remembering to mute for you guys as it is. I don't want to. I'm going to try to keep all of my disgusting accidental philisms to myself as much as I can, anyway. But see how even in this area where there was mostly light, because that sort of fur is hanging over this part of the arm, we need to hit it. We need to hit that drop shadow, or when the areas where his chin might be, since the arm, it's kind of over the arm there, and then again coming over here and hitting the darker side of this arm. In here, because this vest is about as dark as this area here that I just went over. That's probably going to end up being the darkest spot in the entire image, because it's under his arm, it's inside the vest. I mean, there's going to be no light there. I always picture this little part of his goatee being higher than everything else layered on top of it, so we're going to do a little drop shadow there. The Bob Ross of our generation. I don't know about that, but I appreciate the compliment. But you know what? If you're telling me that my voice is even remotely I don't like that. If it's even remotely soothing to you on that level, I'll take it. That's not a bad thing. And I'm going to put a little bit of a shadow here, because he's got this fat lip. I've given him this fat lower lip. So I'm going to push that down. All right, I'm actually going to, oh God, I did a DSP. I'm going to do this here, because I think his goatee's popped up a little bit. His snout is sticking out. So again, I'm going to do, again, kind of picturing, if you look at this snout, thinking to myself, where would it cast a shadow? It would cast a shadow right about there, and it would hook around to here a little bit. You know what, I'm not thrilled with that either. I'll touch that up. I'll make that soft. I don't think that needs a hard shadow. And the other nice thing about doing this digitally and doing it on separate layers is you can just look at it and say, you know what, that didn't work for me, brother. We're gonna get it and get rid of it. We're gonna get it out of there. Redo it, undo it, delete it, erase it, whatever. That's why digital art is so freeing. You really have to go to great lengths to kind of fuck yourself out of an easily manipulated image. Again, so this is all pretty dark. This is like the exact opposite side, so I'm just going to hit it again. But now we have to deal with his head. So his head is going to kick light over this cuff, but down here, this little area here is going to be peeking out a little bit. So we're going to leave it light, and we're just going to let the light kind of, his head kind of darken this up a little bit. You want to hear belches and snorts. All right, well, this got oddly sexual, but I'm into it. And I can't say I'm not into weird shit. I was here drawing waifus just a couple of weeks ago. And I got a little secret for you. The waifus aren't gone. I just stopped subjecting my DSP related community to them. I got the impression that people weren't appreciating getting bombarded with waifus all of a sudden. But I am learning a whole hell of a lot from drawing them, so I am continuing that on my own time for sure. So you see how adding this second layer, and again, this would all, well, I guess it wouldn't all be drop shadow, really. Down here, and we kind of hit where the arm is hanging over. It'd be a bunch of shadow. We're going to leave a little bit of light there moving forward. This would kind of all be drop shadow from that bottle. Maybe get a little bit of something in here just from the folds in the arm. Yeah, I've got a drawing I really like that I'm working up of Yoko Littner from Gurren Lagann. But I laid out the sketch for it weeks ago, and I have not had time. I have not had time to go back and finish her up. You know, I think every artist kind of goes through this. You're doing the same thing for a really long time, the same types of things, and then, like I mentioned before, just drawing that cat, which was a joke, the one at the beginning of the stream. I was like, man, you know, I can kind of see why people really enjoy drawing the female form. There's a lot there to appreciate artistically, especially if you get really over the top and stylize with it, put it that way. And so I've just really been enjoying it. And again, I'm learning a ton from it, like a surprising amount from doing it. I think it's upping my game in a lot of ways, so it's a good thing. All right, so see, now we've got that whole second layer there, and you can kind of look at this. You can go back to this, and then we put on the first layer of shadow, and the second layer of shadow, and you can see how that's just pushing. That's pushing the dimension of the image more and more. Excuse me. All right. Now, I'm going to do one more shadow layer. And I will eventually merge these together, likely. But what I want to do now is all soft. So when you check this brush I've got now, you see how soft that is? It's like a, oh my god, I'm having a brain fart. Why do I want to say an airspray? An airbrush. an airspray. So I'm going to go in, and what I'll do in an instance like this, I'll actually use my lasso tool to kind of select very specific areas so that I'm not putting stuff where I don't want it to be. And I'll just go in and add some airbrush stuff to it. And you see, that's going to help add a bit of realism, for lack of a better way to put that at the moment. A softness to everything. It's gonna, because this is such a round character, I don't mind drawing him with those hard shadows, but it makes him feel a bit more like a physical object, almost like a product, you know, which I am want to draw on a daily basis. But this actually gives us a bit of a softer look. Lets his true pudginess shine through. I'm gonna make sure I lasso all this stuff. So we just have the chunk of the hat here to work with. It just adds, and I'll get rid of all that stuff where it's, where it's peeking off the image or off the edge. But when you are doing, a form this round, you kind of have to, you just have to. You have to add some softness. And I know a lot of people will pretty much only do sort of soft shading on everything, and that is a whole other sort of way to approach it. I personally just really like in graphic type artwork. I always end up doing some hard shadow, like a healthy dose of hard shadow, because I just like that aesthetic. But I do, as you can see, like blending those two aesthetics. Get him right on his back end there. Get the folds of this jacket. So I'm doing them one at a time, so that the shadow isn't sort of going over into areas I don't want it to go into. That's why I'm lassoing little areas like this, so that I just get the parts that I want shaded, and then leave. So like in this fold here, where you notice like it gets a little bit darker here and then a little bit lighter right on the other side of the line, that's how we're getting that visible puff, so that it really looks like that jacket is puffing outward. All right. So I would say that's, oh, you know what? Actually, we need one more. I would say we pretty much got our shadow done, aside from there on the phone. That's a pretty good start, but then I can look at this and say, okay, but now it's really dark. Like it's sort of excessively dark. We need to come back in here with light in various different ways to sort of make all this jump or pop out. And ironically, I kind of like to do light in the opposite way. So we started hard and went soft. I don't know why that made me laugh. I guess because I'm a child. We started hard and went soft with the shadow, and then we're gonna start soft and go hard with the light. And I just realized that's popping out too much. I need to actually get some more proper drop shadow into this jacket. Well, so did I darken that? I didn't. I told you guys that was going to be the darkest part. I'm actually going to put a whole other layer on here to darken under the jacket even further. Even bump it up more. There we go. There we go. That really should be the darkest part. So light, we are going to do in a couple of different ways. And again, this is personal preference stuff. But I actually like, since I'm starting soft, I'm not even going to lasso anything. I'm just going to try to get like a nice big overall light. So I'm going to make my brush pretty big. And what I'm going to do is just kind of simulate where the sun hits the form. And that basically just means waving this brush over the part that's closest to the light. And I may actually, for the sake of it, lasso back here on his butt. Because when you think about it, it's going to sort of encroach over there on the back end on the butt. And hit that a little bit. You see what I toggle that on and off, what that does for us. Now I do have, if I remove the back layer, you can see that's actually covering a lot of our negative space. So you want to remember, if you do it that way, to go back and lasso everything outside of your image and delete it. Delete that white. Otherwise, if you try to work in a background later on, that white's going to be there, and you can delete it later if you want to. It's just kind of good practice to go back and deal with that. And now that I've done that, I'm going to make another light layer. Oh, and I leave the light layers. Actually, I am going to knock this down a little bit. Uh-oh. Why are you being difficult? There we go. I knock my light layers only down to about 75%. And that's just a starting point. As you go through and you work in your separate layers, you may notice that like this highlight layer should be a little more opaque. This one should be a little more transparent. That's what the sliders are for. That's why we keep them on separate layers. There's all again, we're setting a groundwork here to tweak later on. That's why we're keeping everything on separate layers. But then I'll make another light layer at about 75%. And now, on this one, I'll actually go through and start doing what I didn't do earlier, which is, you know, lassoing certain things to kind of get just to keep things separate and not put light where I don't want light to be. And again, or I shouldn't say again, I guess I didn't say this earlier, but I don't find that the lighting things takes too much longer. I think your light should be more subtle, unless you're doing like your specific goal on an image is just make it fucking super poppy and bright. I try to be a little more gentle with the light. I think, ironically, with digital art, at least the way I work, with traditional art, black just blots out everything. That's why you want to work light to dark. But when it comes to digital art, I actually feel more comfortable working in the opposite way, because I think it's in digital mediums, it's a lot easier for white to just blot out everything. But so now we've worked with all these soft brushes, but now we're going to get into something a little bit harder in certain areas, because again, the skin is soft, the hair is soft, so I'm not going to do like major highlights on anything. If I do, as far as his body, I'll explain why. The big one being that I want his hair to look greasy. But so what I'll do is I'll take this brush that's actually kind of semi-opaque. So you look, when I make this is a white, but you see I have to go over it a couple of times to make it a pure white. That's because I have a brush made that's semi-opaque. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in, and anything that has a shine on it, I'm going to put some highlights on them with this brush. And the reason I like the semi-opaque is that you can build up those highlights. So like his hooves, would have sort of a strong highlight on them. This entire surface, since it's pointed directly at our light source, would just be a flat color. But then the hat would have a bit of a stronger highlight. This part of the hat. And see, the other thing that's nice about making this semi-opaque is the highlight here on this thing wouldn't be as bright as, say, up here on the hat. So just taking that one stroke on there, you look at it and go, okay, and just do it one time, and you don't get this like flat white, making it look way too bright for that area. You know, I may put a little bit on the hair, like I said, to make it look kind of greasy. So I put these high highlights on things. The assumption is that it shines a little bit. And when does hair shine, my friends? And so we're just sort of lightly sculpting. Again, sculpting with light on the areas sort of pointed at our light source. I'm not necessarily going to go I'm going to go really light back here on this hoof, because a little bit would hit it, but that hoof is sort of back behind everything else. It's definitely darker. But now, this is where I would say I'm going to make another separate layer, and we're going to do very particular. I'm going to hit the peaks, sort of the peaks of the puffs on this jacket, or this vest, I guess. With very specific lines, and I'm going to let it get pretty bright. And the reason for that is it's going to feel very much like the high shine of a vest, or of his vest, I should say, the stupid metallic vest. I'm also going to get a little. Actually, you know what? We're not going to do reflect light yet. I want to keep that conversation separate too, because it's another important conversation. So kind of like we didn't do drop shadows at first, I'm not doing any reflect light on this layer. So we laid in a soft light, we laid in a harder light. Now I'm going to make another layer. And the same way we kind of went back into drop shadows, we're going to go back and do a reflect light. So a reflect light is something that's going to help your image look more dynamic. It's going to give it a bit more realism. It's going to make it pop a bit more. But what reflect light essentially is when you look at an image or a human body, it's light that's reflecting off of a surface and hitting you in a shadowy area. So for instance, if you are if you're sitting on a white linoleum floor and there's a light coming directly from above you, you're going to have strong light on the top of you, strong shadow on the bottom, but the light that is reflecting off of that floor, a little bit of that's going to come up and hit you on the shadow side. Look in a photo, you can see it really well in a lot of photos, and you'll see a little bit of light that's right up against the edge and on the shadow of an image, like in the bottom of an arm or a leg or something like that. And that's reflect light. So we're going to go in and we're going to put a little bit in there because it's just going to make the image feel more dynamic, more realistic. So ironically, I'm putting little bits of light on the exact opposite side of our light source because the light is reflecting. And you don't do it everywhere. You just kind of, again, like anything else, you kind of consider where that would happen. But you see how, let me toggle that on and off. You see how just having that in there, that little bit of reflect light, everything that does for our image. You see how much it adds to the image just to have that in there. It does a lot. It adds a lot. Okay. So I feel pretty good about that. I think at this point, the only thing I might do is come in here and stipple, which is if you've ever taken a marker or a pencil and just tapped a bunch of dots, it's referred to as stippling. And I would stipple on his skin. And the reason for that is I want his skin to appear porous and kind of, you know, gross and pig-like. And this goes a long way for doing that. Just a little bit of that it adds sort of visual texture to things. Reflect light is kind of based on what you want to get out of the image. So I wouldn't say I would do, you know, strong reflect light in any image, but what I'm doing here is just doing a character drawing, right? And I want to make it look kind of interesting and dynamic, so I'm going to put that reflect light in there. But if I, you know, depending on the environment we would want to put it in, that would change. There's nothing definitive. There's no hard, fast rules. But again, the cool thing about digital art is you can make really poppy, dynamic images, and that goes a long way. So if we were going to put him in an environment, do something different with him, I'd probably change my approach. But since my goal with this is just to make this image look as dynamic and cool as I can, I'm going to go with some reflect light because I think it does a lot for him. I think it does a lot for the image in general. So now that we're there, next I'm going to go through. And this to me was hard for a really long time, and it's still a little bit difficult. You're never going to get it 100% right, but you have to look at this and say, okay, the way we've sort of sculpted this with light is if this particular Pig Roach were just made of a medium gray color, right? Like his beard, his hat, all the stuff we know that would be pretty much like dark black is not. The jacket, which we know, or the vest, which we know would be brighter, is not. The skin, which we all know would be damn near white, is not. So the problem with that is if we just start laying in these colors now, underneath this, a lot of it's not going to look right because the value isn't there yet. We're not done, is what I'm getting at with shading if we're doing it in this method. So now we've got to go through and say, like, the stuff we know is going to be black, we're going to make another layer. And I'm actually going to go down and make it right over the gray layer, so underneath all the shadows. So it is subject to all the shadow above it. And I'm going to make it almost 100% because I want it to be really dark. Be leery about using a flat black, because that's a slippery slope. Flat black can be really hard to manage in an image because it just sticks out like a sore thumb. Plus, you don't get, you sort of eliminate all the shadow that we just threw down by doing a flat black. But what I'm going to do now is this is at about like 85-90% on its own layer. And I'm just going to come in and I'm going to start coloring the things that I know need to be pretty dark. But see, the beauty of putting it underneath everything is as I color it in, it's automatically subject to all of the light and shadow we've already baked into the image. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to color his facial hair, the way I want it. The hair on his head, his eyebrows, the hat, the hooves. Anything I know is going to be, damn near black in the final drawing. And we'll even talk about adding color to that later. A little bit of color, because again, flat whites and blacks, I'm not a fan of them. Some people can make it work. Again, rule of thumb. There's no right or wrong. I've seen people do amazing things with flat whites and flat blacks, but it takes a very specific talent, mindset, and aesthetic to make it work. And I personally believe that you want to try to get a little bit of color in everything, because even, the shadows that are cast on your body in your everyday life, those shadows are subject to color. Mostly color that's reflected off of whatever surface they're coming from, i.e. the sun is yellow. You may be sitting at a table that has a brown or blue tint to it. That's all gonna affect the light that's hitting your form. And so in the real world, you're pretty much never getting hit with straight white light. And if you are, it's because you're sitting under a straight white light. The real world isn't really subject to those hard blacks and whites on a regular basis. Mike Mignola, fucking perfect example. Perfect example of a guy who takes everything that I'm telling you and throws it right out the window and is a goddamn fucking legend, just an absolute master. While using just the hardest of hard blacks. He's a master of Gestalt imagery. If you're unaware, Google it, because I'll explain the concept of Gestalt imagery so unbelievably poorly that I don't even want to try. But Mike Mignola is an absolute master of Gestalt imagery. And for the longest time, I thought I wanted to be, actually, because I actually really like just working in black, whites, and grays. I think that's one of the many reasons I love manga so much, is those creators are so phenomenal at telling their story without color. And believe me, it's nice when you're making a comic to not have to bother coloring stuff. It saves a lot of time. And I know that that's sort of the thing that led manga to where it is. But like any great art form, people took that sort of limitation that they had based on time and did something really incredible with it. And created this just beautiful art form where they have these entire epics told without any color. But when you sort of read it, like, you see the beauty and the color and the world in your mind, and it's amazing. So the unfortunate side of that is when you're an American trying to work in that art form, at least in previous years. Manga's so unbelievably accepted now that stigma's probably not near as strong as it used to be, but there's always this, if you don't have color, you're just a lazy fuck who, didn't take the time to add color to your book and blah, 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 blah. And I think that stigma's still very much alive, but I don't think it is as overbearing a thing for American comic artists as it used to be. Yeah, like I said, I'm a big fan of that too. I love Frank Miller's Sin City. That would be I would say Frank Miller, to me, is kind of the gold standard of Gestalt imagery. But God, I'll be goddamned if Mike Mignola isn't like the closest second you can possibly get. But they're both incredible at it, and I've always been very smitten with their work. But I've always kind of struggled to replicate it. And I don't think that what I've sort of done with my life professionally has helped that either, because I've been I've been, I don't want to say pushed, because you know I was doing all this stuff willingly. But I've landed myself in a situation where I've learned a lot of techniques that basically fly in the face, for a good reason, fly in the face of learning to be really good at black and white work. And there's a part of me that kind of wishes I could unlearn some things to improve my skill in those areas, because I really do just love a strong colorless image. I do. I love it so much. But at the same time, because I struggle so much with it, when I do sort of stick the landing on a really good full color image, god damn, that feels fucking good. That feels fucking good. One of those I feel like I can take on the world after I do it. And then, of course, you know, a day and a half passes, and in my mind, I'm the worst artist who ever lived. So I actually noticed this is looking a bit dark to me, so I'm actually going to dial it back a little bit. And again, I think that's going to give us a little bit of wiggle room to moving forward on our drawing. The beauty of being, again, we can adjust all of this. None of this is permanent. None of it's permanent except for the time that we spend creating it. So as long as you're comfortable with the time you spent, then you're fine. So let's see. We've got the darkest darks. We've got our midtones. I dare say his skin's going to have to be brighter, but I'm not going to touch the skin, and here's why. Because we're going to use such a light peach color that we're going to pull a lot of that back on our own naturally, because the hue of that peach is going to be so white. I dare say the peach in my sort of Spider-Man meme image up there, I probably gave Phil more color than he deserves. But now that we've done that with the darks, we're going to go through and we're going to add another layer. And again, kind of like I said before, maybe about like 80-85%. And we're going to go back in and look at the things that need to be pretty stark white. And the reason we're going to leave that transparency in there is because things can be stark white all day, but they are still subject to the light that hits them and the shadow that is left behind. So coming in and drawing with a flat light when you're not trying to do like a beautiful black and white gestalt image is a mistake. You want to, you know, if you're trying to really shade something with some dynamic lighting, even your whites need to be subject to the light and the color that is bouncing off of them. Obviously, this list of things is going to be far less. So the star and like the logo on the hat, the eyes, the patchy beard, the patch of the patchy beard. I always make that white. So again, there's not much we need to do, just a couple of things, and I think we're in good shape. And I would say, to a very basic degree, we have sculpted this guy in light at this point. And I personally now go into the phase where I drop color in. I actually block color in underneath all of this, and then we're going to go and we're going to adjust the lights and shadows, both color and hue, accordingly, if that makes sense. Or I should say color and shade accordingly. I keep saying hue, and I don't think that's correct. So we're going to go all the way down now to our gray layer. And I actually make a duplicate of the gray layer because I think having that cookie cutter perfect outline, there's a number of reasons why having that in there is perfect, and you want to be able to magic lasso that anytime you want. So leave that just gray layer that just covers the whole form and make another one above it. And this one is the one we're going to color. So we're going to come over here to our image, and I always just kind of pick one first. Normally it's the skin color. Probably make it a little bit sickly white, and I just make a nice big brush and I just paint over the whole thing. And I actually have lock transparency on this layer. It's a function that every digital art program has to make it so that it won't draw over anywhere where there aren't already colored pixels, so that white on the outside stays white. So what I've done, the reason I've done this is because when you're coloring and drawing, I think the worst thing you can do is just leave your gray in there. It sticks out like a sore thumb. So my best practice is just to color the entire layer, whatever, most of the image is going to be colored. And the majority of this image is going to be that sickly pale gross color. Vin Volpus, welcome, welcome. We are live. The Coon, the Coon 1985, god damn it. I said the Coon. I said it 3 times. Welcome. I appreciate I appreciate the compliment and the laugh. God damn it. Susan, not my fault. But now you see that skin color is peeking through everything. So we got to go through and we got to fix that. We got to go through and color the things that we want to color the way we want to color them. So for instance, the green from his ear goo, his ear infection, we'll come down here and color that in. And at this point, for right now, we're just in coloring book mode. This is the part where you relax. You don't have to think as much, which is nice. The red stripe on the hat, I'm just going to lay that in because I'm going to go back over the rest of the hat. So just getting it in there. Now this part of the hat, we want to go through, when we pick a color, I'm not just going to pick a flat black again. I'm not even going to pick a flat gray. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to sort of on my color picker, I'm going to go, I'm so sorry, I can't show you this. I need to figure this out. But I'm going to pick like an 80% gray, but then I'm going to move my picker out a little bit into the blue territory. I personally think that cool blacks are nice, like a bluish hue to a black, I think is really nice. So now I'm coming at this with like an 80% gray that has just a little bit of blue in it. And it's just going to give it a more natural look. You know, it's the same principle as like why sometimes you will see a really dark garment on a movie or a TV show, and you can kind of debate with yourself, is that blue or is that black? I can't really tell. And, you know, chances are it's a black. The color is black, but it's picking up some blue from, you know, the light that's reflecting off of it. And again, it's just going to give you sort of a more natural color overall. I'm just really, really leery about flat, colorless shades of anything. I just think that they tend to look pretty boring and flat. There's like no quicker way to just flatten out your image. And again, you can see on this, like I didn't get too dynamic with this drawing. I kept it pretty basic, and that's fine. But this one, we're trying to get a little more fancy. Let's just say this is probably more dynamic lighting than I would ever, you know, waste on a drawing of Pig Roach. But you know, everyone seemed interested. I want to teach you guys something, so here we are. I dare say his phone would actually be a similar color, and we may change that later. But I'm going to add the phone. I'm going to draw over the phone as well, because I think, you know, I believe he just has a flat black cell phone case. Not that, you know, realism matters on any of this. This isn't Call of Duty, dude. We don't need everything to be super realistic. Hit, 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 hit. And then he shoots me and I die anyway. You know, that old chestnut that we're always hearing. And I'm running through this kind of quick, so if I leave some areas that are, you know, just kind of shitty. Trying to keep this part, which is relaxing and fun to do, but I debate whether or not it's entertaining in any way to actually watch. I'm going to try my damnedest to not make this so boring for you. See, now putting this color in here too, we have now sort of taken the graying patchiness away from his beard, but it's okay. We can fix that. And we're going to do that. Actually, no, you know what? We're going to wait. We're going to wait and do that later, because I want to keep the color that I have on this layer pretty true. And if I have to come back and sort of use the color picker again, I have to go through and shut off all the light and shadow layers to get my true color back. So we'll come back and fix that layer. For right now, we're going to stay on the same layer with the same color and just make sure that all of our black areas are colored correctly. It can be easy to get distracted and then jump off into something else, or to change the color that we have on our brush and, I don't know, shoot yourself in the foot, and it gets a little annoying. It's not unfixable or untenable, it's just annoying. Oh no, Derek's here. Hey, Derek. God damn it. How the fuck do I do this? I always fucking forget how to do this. Get out of here, Derek. All right. Back to our regularly scheduled not porn. He didn't even come on a waifu stream. Just minor comments. Phil is really pale these days. He is. I know. We can adjust it. I promise. We can adjust it later. Believe me, every time I draw him, I'm like, again, I think it's just it's my desire to make the image look interesting and good, and his fucking weird pale skin just doesn't look good. It just doesn't. It doesn't look good in a human. It doesn't look good in drawing. But we can update it later. No worries. I promise we can go back. And this is not Divinity 2. It's not both gone and forgotten. We absolutely have to color the Tanqueray accordingly. Now, I am not a Tanqueray aficionado, so I'm just going to do my best from memory. But I think I would consider, I'll do something that I consider good enough, because we're not here trying to create the dankest memes. We're here trying to just kind of make fun of Phil. But also teach you guys how to draw. Shouldn't lose focus. That's what this is. This is my wonderful, weird detractor friend community coming here to learn drawing techniques. Gotta remember that I'm not talking to normies. I'm talking to the elite, to the special, in the good way. So I'm going to pick a nice bright color, but again, just a hint of blue, right? I picked a light gray, but there's a hint of blue in there, and I think that's really, really important. I can't stress that enough. And that's what we're going to use for the vest, to make sure it has that sort of silvery baked potato about to go in the oven, Chuck McGill's weird electronic protective vest look to it. All right, so now I'm going to look over this and say, what do we got? And you'll notice I haven't put anything in the eyes. I like to do the eyes last. The eyes are kind of their own. They're kind of their own thing, for lack of a better way to put it. So we're going to leave the eyes. David Zerpa, what's up? Potato style indeed. So I think we've got all of our basic color laid in here. And I don't know how you guys feel, but I look at this and say, God damn, this is ugly. And the reason for this is because we have these nice colors that are all just being obscured and kind of beaten down by really harsh, stale lights. Really harsh, stale lights and shadows that are just like flat whites and flat blacks. And it doesn't work for me. I don't like it. And so here's where we're going to be thankful that we saved all of our layers. That was the whole point of this. So we're going to come, and I kind of like to pick a color. That's going to be the sort of the flavor of this image. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to pick maybe like let's do like an orangish red, but make it really light. And I'm going to, again, like I said before, I'm going to turn on layer like transparency lock on the layer, so that when I sort of wipe my brush over this layer, it's just gonna switch just the active pixels, just the color that's already been laid down to this color. So I have picked this layer here, one of our shadow layers. The first one, yeah, the first one from, oh, is that the first one from the bottom? Yes, it is. I'm gonna pick that one and I'm gonna layer lock it, and now I'm gonna recolor it with this sort of pinkish orange color. And you see how that just completely changed the flavor of this image altogether. Now, it's not dark enough. So I am going to go in, I'm going to darken it up a little bit and take another pass. And I'm not even necessarily sold that this is the right color. Like, maybe we need to go with more of a blue. See what that does for us. But you can play around with it. Or, another thing I would say is, maybe it's the solution is not an overall color. Maybe we go back to where it's black, and here's another place where saving all of our colors is going to be a good thing for us. So we're going to come in with our magic lasso, and we're going to go to the layer that has all of our flat colors. Since those flat colors are blocked out, they're being affected by the layers on top of them visually, but they're not, the pixels aren't committed. We're going to come here, and I'm going to magic lasso, all of the flesh tone. Just the flesh tone, okay? And then we're going to go back up to this layer here, the shadow one we were working on. And we're going to sort of, again, pick that color, because I think it looked good on the skin. And we're just going to use it to color just the shadow on the skin layers. And we're going to use something else for the shadow on everything else. So you see what that does for us? How it makes his skin look like skin. But the shadows are now not flat black. They're affecting the skin in a realistic way. This program is Autodesk Sketchbook, by the way. $20, trying to remember, it's a $20 annual subscription service now. I got it when it was free. It was free for a number of years until it was purchased, till it was bought out. But I still think it's worth every dollar. I think it's the program outside of Procreate on an iPad. This is the most natural drawing program I've ever used. I don't have an iPad. They're super pricey. Maybe one day. I have used Procreate before at work, and it's fantastic, but we're not there yet. So I do think, here's the other cool thing, we're going to go back to the skin layer, and I do agree that the skin might need to be a little bit more pale. So we're going to go back, we're going to pick something, pick it even more pale, and we're going to wipe over just the skin layer. And the cool thing about that is, look, now we've made it pale, kind of gross and ghastly looking, and all those layers we just worked on above that are subject to that as well. Like, those colors are going to react to this as well. So we've made them sickly and pale. And then here's the cool thing. So now we've used that sort of orangish color on the shadows of our skin. But I think I want to use like more of a blue for the shadows on everything else, because I think that a lot of these or gray or black colors will react well to that. So now I can just go to my lasso tool, and there's a tool that will allow you to invert your selection. So right now I have just the skin tone selected. When I click this button, you notice how the marching ants appear on the outside of the image. Now it's basically selected everything but the flesh tones. And we're going to do the same thing now. We're going to pick like sort of a darkish blue, and we're going to go back to those same shadow layers. But we're going to wipe over them. And now it's going to add blue to the shadow of everything else. And this is where we reap the rewards of putting all of our shadow on different layers. And that does look pretty dynamic, but it also looks a little like, I don't know. I'm not totally sold on it, but here's another cool thing we can do. So all these layers, they don't have any filtering properties on them, and in these programs you can use these sort of filter properties where you can make what's called like a multiply layer, which basically applies the layer that you're on to the layer underneath it, but darkens everything when it does it. So now I can change these to multiply layers or overlay layers. There's a whole list of them. You can play around with them and see how they affect your drawing. So I've changed all these to multiply layers, and what they've done is they've darkened everything, and you see that it's taken a decent bit of that color away. but there's still just enough in there. We haven't obliterated what we did. This is still far better than just having a flat black image. I do think, though, did I kill? I guess I didn't kill the white in his eyes. So, and again, you'll see his eyes getting a little screwy here, but that's the reason I think eyes are their own beast, and we'll deal with that at the end. So, here we've got our boy. We've got him colored. We have a little bit of color added to all of the shadows. He's looking pretty good for this stage in the drawing, but we're not looking to do just some basic bitch drawing. We're trying to get really kind of fancy with all this. First thing I'm going to do, before I forget, I'm going to come in here and actually, I'm going to go to a higher layer, and I'm going to get some of that salt and pepper back in his beard, because we know that shit ain't flat black. So that's going to get its own layer just to keep it separate from everything else. And I dare say maybe even some of the sun highlight stuff that I did is a bit bright. So again, the beauty of that is I can come in here and just lower the opacity, dial it back a little bit. The sun's not hitting him so hard. Or our main light source, whatever you want to call it. It's not hitting him so hard. So we've got all this stuff laid out. However, again, in the real world, you're going to get hit with reflect light. You're going to get hit with light from different colors. I would guide your gaze up to the top right of my screen, the Candle Pig 3D render that I did. So the reason it has those dynamic colors to it is because I sculpted the Candle Pig, and the same principles apply. I sculpted the Candle Pig, I took it into a rendering program, and I added a green light on the left side and a pink light on the right side, because I think those two colors play off of each other really well. And notice how that candle, like the material of that candle, is just a white. But when those lights hit it, it becomes a far more dynamic image. We're going to do the same thing in this 2D drawing. And the way we're going to do that, we're going to go all the way down to the bottom to our flat gray layer, and I'm just going to magic wand inside of it, because even though all these colors are on top of it, that layer is just a big chunk of gray that encompasses the entire drawing of Phil. So now we have it selected, right? And I like to come all the way to the top, just underneath, make a new layer right underneath your line layer, so that, again, you're affecting everything underneath your layer. And then I like to pick just a wild-ass color, like, let's go pink. Let's just go a pink, just to see how it looks. And I will switch my layer, sort of my layer mode to overlay, and just kind of brush down around on the far edge, the reflect light. And that gives it this appearance like there's like a pinkish light off to the side that's hitting him from his back end. And this layer is still at 100%. We can lower the opacity to make that far more subtle so it doesn't hit him quite as hard. But just look as I toggle that on and off. It adds something. It adds dynamism to the image. It makes it different. And you can switch it. Maybe it looks better as a multiply layer. Maybe it looks better as a screen layer, which screen is what screen does is it makes everything brighter, whereas multiply would make everything darker. And you can kind of play around with these layer properties and say, like, what gives me what I'm looking for. And then, since we're doing that sort of cool, interesting color on one side, let's go to the other side of it, same layer, and let's go pick another color. I actually kind of like to look at my color wheel and say, what's the dynamic opposite of pink? Well, the dynamic opposite of pink is like a green. No, excuse me, frog in my throat. And now we'll go on the other side in that same layer, and let's hit that with sort of this like sickly green color. Again, not obliterate it, not knock it out, just sort of dust that edge with it. And again, do you see like how much that does for the image? I can dial it up, dial it down, and it's probably better to keep it subtle. It's more natural that way. It does so much for the image to just put that little bit of reflect light on the edge. And then you can actually come in, if you want, make another layer and go a little bit harder edge with it. Like if you want this light to really pop, you can come in here with a harder edge brush and hit everything with it. Like this would be, if he's really whatever it is, there's some green light over there just casting him in this truly unholy light, but it just makes it look cool. Right? Again, we're not trying to put, right now, we're not trying to put this image. And what we're doing today, we're not trying to put this image in a definitive space. We're not trying to put it in a particular environment. We can cover that as well. But if we're just looking to make a drawing of a character that's really dynamic and pops, and we're not worried about where that character is sitting, man, a really good way to make it look interesting, to make it pop, is to get in there with some crazy reflect light. So now we've laid all this stuff out. If you really want to, you can come all the way to the bottom underneath everything and give them a little bit of a shadow, like with a soft brush. Maybe even go a bit more desaturated with it, so it's almost flat black. And you can mess with the opacity on that. If you really want, if you at least want to make your character feel like they're grounded to something, they're sitting on something. But I don't think it's necessary. This is more like if I were doing a design of a sticker. If I was going to try to sell this thing as a sticker, this would be the way I would approach it. So then the only other thing I think we got to do is do Homeboy's eyes, okay? And I'm going to go up underneath, right underneath the line layer again, because again, eyes are kind of their own beast. And while I do want them to be subject to the rest of the drawing, I think you kind of gotta nail the eye itself down first. You really gotta pay attention to how you do eyes. I'm gonna give him a little pupil because in my mind he is not happy about his most recent pull, right? He thought he was gonna get that fucking newest 6-star, and instead he got like some fucking 3-star jobber, and he's upset about it. Some guy he has a million of, or girl. You know, they got him in the game too. So give him a small little pupil. And I'm even gonna go in. I'm sure he has like shit brown eyes or something. I really don't know, and I don't care. And I'm gonna go in with a pen that has sort of low opacity and layer this in lightly. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because even your eyeball is rounded. It's not going to be a flat color, so it's going to be darker on the lower parts and brighter on the higher parts. And even this color of the light is subject to the shifting of light. So what I actually did here was I took that brown I was working with and I sort of moved my color wheel towards more of a yellow and made it a little bit brighter so that the higher highlight areas, they just get a little something more dynamic. Like you can't just... If you just make an eye a super flat color, you're just not going to be happy. You're not going to be happy with what you end up with. I think that's probably the simplest way to explain it. And then now that I've put all this all on one layer, I'm going to lock layer transparency, lock that layer again. And I'm going to take a brush, a soft brush with a color, with a almost black, that has a little bit of color to it, and kind of dust the top of it, because again, it needs to be subject to that. We have to see the way that the brow over that eye is affecting the eye. Maybe put a little bit of it on the back. Maybe even taking a little bit of the pink color from your reflect light and dashing it on there a little bit. And then one of my personal favorites, we're going to go above the line layer with this thing all the way up to the top with a semi-transparent white brush and give them some little dots on there. And what that's going to do is make the eye feel real. It's going to make it feel wet. It's going to make it, like an eyeball is. It's a wet ball, but you add those little details. And I'm going super basic. Like, you could watch entire tutorials on how to render really dynamic eyes. There are people on the internet who are fucking incredible at it in ways that I will never be. I will just never be. So as I look at this, like, this thing's in pretty good shape. I would look at this drawing and go, hey, this is awesome. I can send this out into the world. Or I can look at it and say, how else can I make it even more interesting and more dynamic? This is where, you start to scrutinize your own drawing. So I kind of take the time. And a lot of times when I don't overly scrutinize my own drawing, I hate it later. So let's take a second. Let's take a second to scrutinize. And I could go nuts for the next hour rendering up an interesting eye, but again, I don't think it merits this. Like, that is an acceptable eye for our boy and for our purposes. But I can look at this and say, like, you know, this hair needs a little bit of highlight to it so that it feels greasy. Same with his eyelashes, like this hair here. Just adding these little highlights to it, they're going to make it feel a little greasy, right? They're going to make them pop, make it stand out, but also make it feel a little greasy. You might add some highlight lines to the hoofs in certain places to make them feel like they have sort of that striated texture that a real hoof has. Because making it more textured, it's going to make them feel a little, you know, weirder and grosser. I can look at this phone and go, oh, there'd be a little bit of reflect light here. In fact, I dare say we could actually reflect his skin color on here and really make it look more realistic. You can look at things like the Tanqueray bottle. Consider, if the light is hitting that Tanqueray bottle, it's going to reflect that green. So you can put a little bit of that green in the beard near it. Just shows you the light's hitting that Tanqueray bottle, motherfucker. It's giving off some light, because it's gonna. Right, so we can get a little bit of that in there. Oh, I noticed. Again, so you're not paying attention, you might throw a drawing out in the world that's not ready to go out there. You need color for these bubbles. These bubbles shouldn't be a skin tone. And they should have little highlights on them. There should be little highlights and reflect lights on the bubbles so that they feel realistic. Eyes are fun, I agree. Like, sometimes I like to just draw and render eyes and mask, because that in and of itself is it's something I'm really bad at. I'm bad at eyes in general, but it's fun practice, and you know, that's how you get better at stuff. You focus on the points where you're weak. That's how you get better. So again, now we can just go through, like, okay, I look at, perfect example, you see I've got the stubble on his face, right? But I look here on his chest, and I'm like, dude, homeboy would have, like, on his double chin, his chest, he'd have stubble on there too, right? So I make a layer underneath the, I lasso it on the line layer, then I make a layer underneath. I'm going to pick sort of the dark color of his skin, maybe even change this layer to like a multiply layer. And I pick my brush, oops, that's way too big. Pick my brush that has my speckle brush, right? And give homeboy a little bit of texture and filthiness to his chest, because he's not going to have a clean chest. Let's be serious. We know better. We know better. Maybe even put a little bit of that on his butt and on the legs to make it, again, to make them feel visually textured. Because we can't suggest that Darkside Phil has like the pores of a Greek god. We know he doesn't. So, you know, we're in the fine detail portion of this. And another thing you can do, well, I personally really like a strong black line. Let me be clear about that. I might not like flat blacks in big fields of color, but I like a strong black line. But a lot of people don't like a strong black line. So another thing you can do to kind of punch up an image is to turn your line layer. I always like to make a copy, so I have my original lines, and then I turn it off. Or I should say I hide it. And then I take the second one and I turn on layer transparency, so I can kind of take a color like maybe a dark blue or something and just paint over my lines. And look at that and go, okay, that's not great. Maybe because this image is so fleshy, we go with something like a brown. Something a bit more flesh tone, and put it over there. And see, that gives an entirely different look. You see how coloring that line work, it gives a completely different dynamic to the image. And truth be told, you could go in here and change your lines. You could go like, okay, well, I want that brown around the flesh, but I want a blue, like a bluish around the vest. You could go in here and get, you know, super detailed to that extent, to where you have those, you're specifically coloring the line work. A lot of people do that. I got no problem with colored line work. It's not my favorite. And one of the tricks I like to do personally, because to be honest, I get asked to color line work a lot at work, because it gives a certain youthful quality or look to things. One of the things I like to do is kind of my trick is I go to my line layer and I switch it to an overlay layer. And what that does is it starts to kind of, it lets all the color come through, and it's not perfect, but it kind of, you know, it merges, like you can see up here on the top of the hat, it kind of lets the color underneath sort of infect the color of the lines. And if you duplicate it again, that line gets a little bit stronger. But then you pop your original black and white line work on there, on top of those overlay layers, and then just, dial the opacity down just a little bit. And now you notice it's not black anymore. You're starting to let some of those browns and beautiful colors that you've created, you're letting them peek up through your black line work and give it just enough of a flavor that that you get what you want. Where this can be perilous is that in an eye, now I did the eye on a separate layer, but you can destroy the pupil of an eye because you destroy that hard black of it. So you just go back over the top and redraw that. Or for instance, you see how now like the holes in his nostrils, basically his pig's nostrils are not as strong as they used to be with that dark color. So I'll just go over on top of that and I'll just paint right back over it with something darker, because I want those nostrils to feel deep, dark, and cavernous. And so this is the point where we're kind of less technical. Now we're painting a little bit, right? We laid the groundwork with all the work we did prior to this. We worked really hard, we laid the groundwork, and now we're making tweaks and adjustments and we're painting. Or here's another great thing I was talking about, you know, the dangers of flat whites and blacks. So I added a bunch of color to my shadow, right? Well, what if we go back, like this sunlight layer, and we're like, you know, well, this is a white. This is a white color and it's affecting everything. But isn't the sun sort of a yellowish orange? Yeah, it is. So let's layer transparency lock it and wipe over this with a yellow. Completely changes the image, right? And it's a bit harsh, but again, we can come and do, maybe if it's an overlay layer, is it a screen layer? Do we lower the opacity a little bit? And you see how that just adds a dynamism to the image. And I may even, you know, go in here and say it needs to be more of a yellowish green because of everything else we've done in the image. You just start playing with the colors, right? You kind of gotta, you make these choices as you work. And the whole purpose of having these different layers is so you can make these tweaks without obliterating your image, and you can always take them back. Like there, I just lowered the opacity on that white layer a little bit because it was a bit harsh, it was a bit much, right? And so now that you have all this stuff on different layers, you can just go to town. You can start adding more colors. You can go like, well, fuck, it looked super cool that light was dynamic. So now let's go in here and let's go all the way to over the top of our lines, over the top of everything, and just pick some fucking wild ass color, like a fucking purple. Put it over the top of this, and then start messing with the layer properties. I mean, it's weird, but it's kind of cool, and it adds a dynamism to the image. Again, that wasn't there before. Like, I don't know if I would keep that, but play. Like, at this point, you've done all the work, you've laid out what you want to lay out, now it's time to just play. You know, fuck with your lights, fuck with your colors, have fun with it, because that's what, you know, theoretically, that's what you're here to do, is have fun with it. And you see how this image in and of itself looks far more dynamic than this one up here, because that one was serving a different purpose. In fact, I very much, when I created this drawing, I didn't want to go too crazy with the lighting, because the lighting in the original meme was very flat. Like it was a traditional, like, I think it was a 60s cartoon show, right? So I got super flat for a reason. And then, you know, you can also come in here and say, when you're done with all this, you've laid all this out, you can go like, well, you know what, it looks cool on white, but maybe I want to go all the way to the bottom, make a separate layer, and let's see what it looks like over black. Just fill it all in. Say, oh, that's interesting. Maybe it doesn't need to be a flat black. Maybe it needs to be like a gray. Like, what do you want your image to look like, you know? You can put a white outline around this. It gives it kind of a sticker quality. I do that sometimes, and I think it's kind of cool. I actually want to... This is still picking up that peach color we did at the very beginning, so I want these lines to be black, so I'm going to go in and touch them up. Take the time to touch things up. Play with it. Get what you want out of your image. a lot of times, something I like to do, and I didn't group any of this stuff, and I should have, so this is completely my fault. So unfortunately, you're gonna have to sit here, and you can't see my layers, unfortunately. So you're gonna sit here for a second while I group all of my stuff one by one. Because those of you that know Photoshop know that selecting multiple layers and grouping them all together is super easy in Photoshop. In Autodesk, you literally have to make a group and throw every layer in individually, and it's really fucking annoying, and I don't know why they haven't fixed it. It made it easier to do. It's insanely annoying and time consuming. So normally I try to remember at the very beginning to make a group before I start coloring something, just so, you know, the asset of, you know, the Pig Roach as a whole can be moved around as needed. But so here I've got him. He's all together, right? I can move him around as I see fit. So a lot of times, something really stylistic that a lot of people do, if you want to throw your image up on social media, something for funsies, I'll duplicate that whole group that I just made, and then I will flatten it out. Use the flatten function so that now everything's committed. It's just a flat image, and put it behind the group, and then increase its scale, move it kind of somewhere off to the side to where it might look interesting. See a little bit of eye or something, and then lower the opacity to like 25%, maybe even less. A lot of people do this. It's a nice way to kind of fill that space on the outside and makes your image feel a little bit more complete, a little bit more artistic, right? It's got a cool quality to it. And then if you're a real pretentious nutsack like me and my ilk, give it a little siggy so that everybody knows that it's your particular brand of ridiculousness. And there we are. We have this image now that in 2 streams we have taken from foundational sketching to this finished rendered piece. But again, this is sort of my preferred method for making a really dynamic and interesting image of a character, but this isn't the end all be all. We have different ways we can do this. We can work with different lighting to make him look like he's in a really dark room. Like maybe he's sitting in the middle of the night and he's pulling for Hogan's at fucking 4 a.m. in the pitch black, and Ket's trying to sleep, or actually say she's sleeping downstairs. Jasper's trying to sleep, so he's got to keep the lights off. And so he has to be illuminated solely by, you know, the light of the room or the light of his phone, right? And there's a million different ways we can do that. The best practice would be to sort of build that from the ground up. However, just to give you a little bit of a taste of what I'm talking about here, maybe we come in here and we make a new layer over the top of him, which is the flat black. We use a soft eraser, lower the opacity a little bit so we can see him. We use a soft eraser. We kind of lasso this area in front of the phone, and we go like, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Bear with me a second while this saves. And there's this light. And then we come in here and we kind of sculpting with light. We come in here and erase the darkness in the areas where it would be hitting him the hardest. And again, this is kind of incongruent with the base image because the light in the base image is completely different. That's why I would say this would be the kind of thing we need to build this image from the ground up to reflect this. But this is just kind of a teaser, if you will, for what I think we should cover the next time we meet for to draw a Pig Roach. To give you an idea of what something like this might look like. And maybe we even go overlay, or no, wait, color burn, you know. Just to make it feel like he's in a really dark space. And there's all sorts of ways to play with the light in this respect too, to make it different. So, but for right now, I think that's a perfectly good way to finish this whole thing off. I'm happy with it. Hope you guys are happy with it. I hope you learned something or at least enjoy your time hanging out. Hopefully we're going to get a stream again pretty soon where I'm actually, talking a little bit about Phil in particular. I would like to do some proper restreams and stuff like that, but it all comes down to timing. Obviously, at the end of the day, this shit is my passion. So thank you guys for being here with me. Thanks for hanging out. I think I'm just going to play you out a little bit here. I think I'm going to go rip off some fucking Gundam Evolution before I go to bed. If you haven't played, excellent free-to-play game. I've had a ton of fun with it and haven't had to spend a dime. But I'm going to go ahead and get out of here for the night. Thank you guys for hanging out. Yeah, we'll catch you next time when we start playing around with some different lighting effects on To Draw Pig Roach Part 3, I guess.